Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Hello and welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. We have many of our podcasts that revolve around or have this emerging theme of building relationships. And I think it's all about building a proper culture, and it comes from building those relationships with everyone, between the community, within the district, students, and this culture is so important. But I think building these relationships is even more important now than ever. Wouldn't you say, Jerri? We've seen that a lot.
Absolutely. And our guest today has been very strategic about doing that. One of the things I want to say about our guest, Susan Enfield, is that in my role at ClassLink, I get to go around the country and meet superintendents from across the nation. Susan is a standout. She is in the top, maybe 2%. She is amazing. Everywhere I go, she really does stand out. And I think the reason that she stands out is not only does she build relationships, but she's very strategic about the way she does it. And she knows how to get the message out there. She knows how to make sure everyone is on board and understands what's happening. And I think that people talk about these relationships, but people don't know the process that underlies that and how to make that all happen. So that's why we have Susan here today, because we're going to ask her to pull the curtain back and share some of that magic that she does. She has been honored on so many occasions because of the work that she has done. She is, and I use this term in the most loving way, she is one of those badass women that gets out there and gets the work done. And if it's good for kids, she does it. And I admire that about her. She's not afraid to move forward and take a stand and do what needs to be done.
We certainly need more people like Susan in education, for sure, in our world in general, I think.
Oh, we really do. We really do. So, Susan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jerri. Hi, Jamie.
Yes, we're so glad to have you on the show. First of all, tell us the news, the exciting news about the change that's about to happen in your life.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for the warm and glowing introduction. I think we should tell people to manage expectations. I don't know that I'm going to live up to all of that, Jerri, but
You got this. You got this.
Yes. So after 10 years serving as superintendent here in Highline Public Schools, just south of Seattle, effective July 6th, I will be serving as the new superintendent for Washoe County Schools in Reno, Nevada.
Yes. And, I was reading on LinkedIn, you had a letter to your district ahead of time, didn't you? That's
Yeah, I made the decision actually to move on to my next adventure back in the spring of 2021, and made the decision to announce at the end of the last school year to my board and community that this school year would be my last in Highline. And I did that for a number of reasons. First of all, I wanted to give my board maximum time to find a great person to succeed me, which they did, Dr. Ivan Duran, who's going to do extraordinary work taking Highline to the next level. I also wanted to have the freedom to do my search in public. I think, as you may know, it is awkward for superintendents and as a sitting superintendent to be part of a public search when your own community doesn't know you're doing that. I didn't want there to be any awkwardness. And also, I think, and I've said this many times over the past year, I think every leader has a shelf life. And if we're smart, we figure it out before someone figures it out for us. And I think as leaders, it's important that we have the capacity for self-reflection and humility and honesty to know when it's time, not just for us to move on, but for the systems that we lead to benefit from a set of fresh eyes and a fresh thinker and a leader who can propel them to the next level. And I just knew that was it was the right time for me and it was the right time for Highline.
Yeah, I do too. And it really sounds like you were very intentional about this. And it really speaks to what makes you so terrific as a leader. It's that
Yes.
open and honest communication with everyone. And now you are helping to move forward your mission by being part of that process. No questions, no secrets behind. And I
Right.
think that's
Yes, the
Well,
transparency is huge.
yeah. And, and I will say too, I'll be honest. I mean, I was starting to feel a little stale, as a leader. I was starting to feel like, I felt like I had done what I could do here in Highland. And I'll be really honest. I have a great board. I have an amazing team. This is a wonderful community. I could have, ridden this out for another couple of years. And frankly, it would have been pretty easy, right? I mean, we've got the flywheel moving. Not that we don't have tons of work to do. We do, but the conditions are in place to do that work. But Highline deserves a leader who's not stale, right? They deserve a leader you know, who has that next sort of vision for where the district needs to go. They deserve that. And so, like I said, I just knew it was the right time. And while it is bittersweet to leave, it's sad to say goodbye to friends and colleagues that I really love and have worked alongside and fought alongside for so many years. I know in my heart that it's the right thing to do and the right time to do it.
No, you're not doing the easy thing. You're doing what makes sense and what is good, for the greater good,
Mhm.
which and not just, what is easy for yourself. And that's really important. What would you say is your most proud initiative that you have conquered or that you have led in your current district?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jamie. There's so much work that we've done in Highline that all of us in Highline have to be proud of. I think that uh, it's not so much an initiative, but sort of the heart of the culture that we've created here. And that is our Highline promise. And that promise is to know every student by name, strength, and need so they graduate prepared for the future they choose. It has been replicated and co-opted by districts across the country, which I actually think is a wonderful thing. I think it's great that we have found a way to convey the work that we do for children in a way that resonates with other educators across the country. And I will say this, when I came to Highline, I think you all know many systems have a mission or a vision statement. But in my experience, a mission or a vision statement can be quite one dimensional. And it can also, as a result, I think, sort of devolve into being nothing more than a real platitude. And so when I came to Highline, I thought, let's not do the mission vision. Let's make a promise because a promise implies action. We are promising to our families, our students, our community that we are going to know our students. We're going to know them well, and we are going to make sure that they graduate prepared for whatever they choose for themselves, that we're not going to put limitations on our students by denying them access to opportunities that they are deserving of, all of that. And over time, that promise, and I say this, has really become the DNA of our system. It's what we lead with in how we recruit and hire staff. It's what we lead with in every presentation that we make, be it a presentation on academics, on mental health and social emotional learning. We led with our promise on every webinar that we did during the time that we were in distance learning, whether that webinar was on masking and distancing and sanitizing, we still led with our promise. And so I think for me to see the way that promise has taken root here in Highline and influenced who we are and how we lead, and also had a broader influence across other districts across the country is something that I think all of us in Highline are very proud of. And I think I'm also proud that that promise is going to continue long after I'm gone.
Susan, give us an example of how you do that as in your hiring practices. It's so critical to get the right people in Highline that can take this forward. So how do you use that when you hire people?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jerri. The most amazing initiative, strategy, body of work that you want to do will go nowhere without the right people
Right.
to do it. I mean, that's it's
Exactly.
people business. And so one of the things that, we have done is we've invested heavily in our human resources team led by our Chief Talent Officer, Steve Grubb. And we've partnered with Dr. Meredith Honig out of the University of Washington's Design Lab and have really rethought human resources and moved it from being a purely transactional sort of office to being more of a transformational office and looking at how we bring people into the system. So for example, we in all of our job descriptions, we lead with that promise. We are very clear in the district's commitment to being an equitable anti-racist systems. We ask questions directly about that. I've said to my hiring team, we can train people up. We can invest in their skills. They need to bring the fire in the belly and the true belief in our children. I can't instill that in you. You believe in our kids or you don't. And if you don't, respectfully, then you're not, I don't want you here.
Right.
Because we need people, we need adults who really believe in the infinite potential that our children all have. And so really that's what it comes down to. And so I'll give you an example. Our HR team and our principals and others, we have an extensive and exhaustive process when we hire, especially building leaders. We actually put our interview teams, and our interview teams for building principals consist not just of central office leaders, but of teachers, students, families. And they all go through implicit bias training prior to the hiring to make sure that we are, bringing on board the highest quality, most diverse staff possible. And then it's an extensive process that people bring to. And when the principal finalists come to me, and typically I interview the 2 to 3 finalists, the one question I always ask them is, why Highline? Why are you choosing to come to Highline? Because you are making a choice. There are over 13,000 school districts in this country, and you're choosing Highline, and I need to know why. And that for me is very telling. What do they know about the system? What do they know about our promise, and how does it resonate with them? So I think it's being clear as a system about our values and what we prioritize. And so that when people come on here, they know what they're signing on for, because there are easier places to work than Highline. I'm very clear about that. But I think this is an incredibly special place to work, and it's special because of the people who choose to make this their professional home.
So you have high standards. What about the people that are already there? Are there some supports in place to help them if they're not quite there in that thinking, but want to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think especially, so I'll sort of rewind back to 2012 when I came to Highline. I think it's really important that you give people an opportunity to meet your expectations and provide them with the conditions and support to do that. And so, coming into any new system, and I'll be doing this when I go into Washoe, it's taking the time to get to know. Well, first of all, it's choosing the system wisely, right? You want to choose a system that's a match for your values and who you are as an educator. And then it's getting to know the people in that system and figuring out their strengths and their passions and what really drives them. And then identifying, do we have them in the right role? Sometimes it's someone who believes in the work and wants to do the work and is stuck in a role that is just not the right role for them. So the example I'll give is my current cabinet. There is now at this point one person on my cabinet who was in that role when I got to Highline. The rest of the people on my cabinet I promoted from within or brought in from the outside. And so it's making sure that you get the right people on that team. And I always believe that the strongest teams are a mix of people that you've moved up through the system because they have the institutional knowledge and history. It also signals to others in the system that you believe in the people who are there and that there is a pathway to advance, because nobody likes to stagnate. Nobody likes to become stale. People want to see a path forward for themselves in their professional career. And then also bringing in those fresh eyes, the people who can come in and sit around the table and say, wait, what? Why do you do it that way? And I think that we've built that in Highline at the central office level, and frankly, in our school level, at our at our schools as well.
Yes. So what do you tell teachers about? So the 3 concepts are to know everyone's name, their strength, and the third one was their need. So what do you tell teachers? How are they going to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a question that we've talked a lot about through the year. And I want to be clear, we have nearly 18,000 students in Highline Public Schools. And I'm not going to look you in the eye through this camera and tell you that today, every, almost 18,000, one of those students feels that they are known by name, strength, and need in the system. It's a promise that we get up each and every day and work harder to deliver on. And I think how we operationalize that has been sort of ongoing work for us. So this is what I said from the outset, and then I'll give an example of how we really worked to operationalize it during the pandemic. It's not, and I was a high school teacher. I was a high school English, ELL, and journalism teacher. So like many high school teachers, I had upwards of 150 students that I saw on a daily basis. And I knew that as a high school teacher, the most fundamental form of respect that we can show another human being, whether they're a young human being or an old human being, is to know their name, a name that's pronounced correctly with respect. And so I told my students at the beginning of the school year that I would know all of their first names by the end of the first week. And I wouldn't use seating charts. I really encouraged them to sit anywhere that they wanted in the classroom. And I knew that just fundamentally as a new teacher, nobody taught me that in graduate school, but I just knew that if I expected my students to enter my classroom each day and give me respect, I needed to afford them the same respect in return. And so that really was sort of how I approached my work as a teacher, as an educator. And so when I became an educational leader, I started thinking, well, it's really about how do I, as a leader, create a system where students are known by name and need. And then when I got to Highline, they were reading a book by Dr. Yvette Jackson called The Pedagogy of Confidence. And the basis of that is, what if we treated every student as gifted? And so then it came out, let's not just focus on what our students need, because that really sadly lends itself to a more deficit-based way of thinking. And that certainly does not help our students. And what if but we also can't deny that every student has needs. Every human being has needs, right? We're all a work in progress. But what if we said, we're going to know our students, not just by name and need, but by strength? We're going to identify what our students are good at, what they are confident about, so that we're building their resilience, we're building their confidence, we're building their courage muscle, right? So that they can try new things, that they can experience failure and learn from it and move forward and be better. So what I've said to teachers at the beginning, when people, I've got 150 kids, I can't know them all. I said, I'm not asking you to know every one of your 150 students equally well. As a high school teacher, I didn't have the same level of relationship with every one of my students, right? A student that sort of connects with me, Jerri, might not connect with you, and vice versa. And so my challenge to my building leaders and my staff was, there's a lot of adults in that school building. And so it's not just on you as that one high school teacher to know those 150 students. It's up for all of the adults in the school to see themselves as a team and to identify who can connect with each of those students. It can be a coach, right? It can be, sometimes it's the front office manager who connects with a student, but there has to be that one adult relationship where when I ask students, when I talk with them, and I do almost every week, do you have an adult in your building whom you trust, who knows you, who cares about you? Every hand needs to, and they don't need 20, but they need one. And so when the pandemic hit and we had to go into distance learning, and, that looked different depending on where you were in the country. Where we are in the Seattle area, I had about 10,000 kids who walked out of their school buildings in March of 2020 and did not re-enter until September of 2021. So, I mean, they were really disconnected physically from their school communities. And I knew that we had both a challenge and an opportunity to use this moment in time to make sure that those connections between adults and students were happening by design, not by chance. And so my ask of my building leaders was, we need to establish a one-to-one connection system. And I asked a team of professionals in our system to come up with a plan whereby the leadership team in schools would work with their staff to literally assign an adult to a student. And that adult, we reached out to that student via text, Zoom call once a week, just to check in and to build that relationship so that that student knew that they were still connected to their school community, even though they weren't physically in their school community on a regular basis. And we've continued that. And then we extended it by, using some of our ESSER dollars at the beginning of the school year last year and this year to provide one-to-one connection days where our teachers, rather than teaching, just made home connections, just talked to parents and families and asked, what is it that you want me to know about your child? Who are they? What do they need? What are they good at? What motivates them? To establish sort of that baseline, because one of the things that I think I thought a lot about during the pandemic is, we really I think, have moved towards what I call hashtag Team Kid. So it's families and staff in a school collectively teaming to make sure that every student succeeds. And that's really sort of how we've taken this to scale. And is it work in progress? Absolutely. But it's work that I am so grateful that our team here in Highline takes to heart and goes above and beyond to deliver on each and every day.
It certainly takes a village.
It does take a village, and the community building that you're doing, I feel like you laid the groundwork and kind of set the stage in preparation for their world, but also this world that we didn't know was coming. And you really had this in place because, I mean, and not once have you mentioned curriculum standards. You know that the biggest investment in time is people, is either who you're, most importantly, your students and the people who are supporting your students, the teachers, the building administrators, the district administrators, and using strengths to make sure that you have all of those people in place. And using strengths also is another important factor too, because it empowers people. It makes them feel it makes them happy, right? They know that they are doing something that is in their heart and helps to motivate them and empower them to be the best that they can be. And that's what you want in a district. You want people who are happy. And unfortunately, this year has been such a struggle for everyone globally. And when you have that foundation of people who are happy in what they're doing and motivated and connected with each other, I think that is more than half the battle. For sure.
I agree. And I think one of the things that I learned over the years, because I think as leaders, we also need to talk about what we're learning. And I think we need to acknowledge mistakes and what we learn from them. And one of the things that we've learned over the years, Jamie, is that promise needs to apply to the adults just as it does to the students.
Oh, yeah.
And, I have over 3,000 employees. If I could walk into a room and recognize some and not recognize others, right? I mean, that's just real. I mean, no one's that good, right? I just, however, I do make it a point to do the best I can to get to know as many people as I can and remember them. And I think one of the heartening things that I've heard, as I'm on my long goodbye from Highline and, saying, my farewell tour of saying goodbye to people. One of I think the things that has touched me the most and is what what makes me proud and what I'm going to miss is the number of staff who have said that I made them feel seen. And at the end of the day, I think we all have a human need to be seen and to be heard. And, our staff and our families and our kids also hold us accountable to that promise to know everyone by name, strength, and need. And it's not always easy. I think one of the things that leaders need to know is that when you are bold and loud about what you're committing to as a system, you need to expect people to hold you accountable to. And I remember the first board meeting years ago where somebody got up and gave public testimony and said, this decision is not delivering on your promise. This means that you are not knowing every student by name. And of course I was completely crestfallen at the end of the meeting. I'm like, oh my gosh. And my chief communications officer, Catherine Carboni Rogers, said, no, this is good. This is a good thing. This means that the promise really has taken root. It's resonating with people and they should hold us accountable to that. Right? They absolutely should hold us accountable to that. And I will also say too, because Jerri mentioned our equity work at the outset of the podcast, the term equity now has come to mean very different things to different people. And we need to find a way to talk about that equity work in a way that a broader sort of array of folks in our communities can really hear and understand. And I think that the Highline promise to know every student by name, strength, and need so they graduate prepared for the future they choose is the best definition of equity that I can come up with. And it doesn't use the word equity, But at the end of the day, if you think about it, what does every parent, family member, provider want for their child? They
Yes.
want them to walk into a school and be truly seen and supported, and to graduate prepared for whatever they want, to have every option available to them. And so every parent wants. And so I think we need to start talking about the work in those kinds of ways.
Right. And the Highline Promise doesn't exclude anyone. No one feels like they've been left out of it. And I think sometimes when we initiate a specific program, one group of people or another feels like they have been targeted or left out. And so this is really a very inclusive plan that makes everyone feel like they belong and they're a part of it. It's really genius, Susan.
It is genius because it's so broad that makes it to make it inclusive of everyone, but so specific that every one person does
Yes.
feel that connection. And
Yes,
it's not as
right.
if you, Susan, is going to know everyone's name, but your mission, this promise that everyone is
Seen and heard.
right,
Right.
is that they're either students with each other, or teachers with students, or building administrators with teachers or with students. It's just a nice sort of spreading out of love and inclusivity, and everyone can be a part of that promise. It's not as if it's a top down sort of mission and vision. I mean, I was a part of creating missions and visions as a teacher, as an administrator, and as a parent. And I sort of feel like it's something that we spend, several weeks, several months on, and then it gets stamped, very nicely on our stationery. But is it really something that we all know and that we are proud to be a part of?
It can't just be words on paper, right? And so when I say that it's the DNA of our system, I think that really conveys something, right? I mean, and what I say about our principals, our teachers, our paraeducators, our central offices, everybody, really they feel that promise in their bones, right? It is really what drives them. And I will say, when I came up with that, it really, as I tried to share, it was really born from my experience as an educator and my values as an educator and a human being. And it, of course, evolved as I evolved and as I've learned. And, as I said, I think the first time that I saw our promise on another district's website years ago, I was like, and, and then I saw another several years ago, another district in another state, and the school board members and the superintendent were actually saying it, our promise this, and I'm like, wow, like this is, and I think it's easy. I think as leaders, we have to actively work to suppress our ego.
I
Right?
agree. Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
let's face it, as leaders, we all have to have some ego. So to say that you're ego free is just a lie. We all have to have a healthy amount of ego to move forward. But I think you also have to suppress it enough that it doesn't become all about you and the work. And so I had to say in those moments where I was like, hey, that's mine, not yours. I realized, no, it's really ours, right? Really, that promise should be our shared commitment as educators in our public education system across the country to our children, our families, and our community. And wonderful if we could all embrace that, right? Think of what the systems would be if we could all say that's what we've collectively committed to. So I've come to see it as just a wonderful thing and not a proprietary thing.
Right.
Even though I did have that moment, because I'm I got over it.
Right. But that's the highest flattery for someone to take that and want to use that for their students.
Right.
But more importantly, think of the ripple effect that I just talked about, that of course you have within your own district. Now this ripple effect is going nationwide, possibly globally, which it really is important toward that work in equity, toward that work in making everyone feel included. And of course, the ultimate, the foundation here is building relationships. So and I'm thinking too, this must have been hard for you to make the decision to go, but even harder to find somewhere that you can find that is also going to be welcoming and of this philosophy. How did you find your new home? What was part of your
Great
process?
question.
That is a great question, Jamie. And I love that you use the term home, because when I do a lot of mentoring of new leaders, aspiring leaders. And one of the things I always say is choose your professional home wisely. Because for those of us who work in public education, it is a professional home, because you're going to spend a lot of time there and invest so much of your intellect and your heart and your energy, that you need to choose that professional home wisely. And I've seen too many superintendents and leaders choose a place for the wrong reasons. And so you are right. There were a lot of district openings that I did not go for lots of different reasons. And some of those are personal. I have a wonderful husband. His happiness matters to me. And so I'm not going to choose to go live and lead somewhere that he doesn't want to go live. So, that piece, there's the personal side, our families, and how we find a place that they feel comfortable with as well. And so, there were only 2 districts that I, applied to, even though there, as you are well aware, there are a lot of district openings right now. And I considered others, but I only applied for 2. I applied to San Diego Unified and was one of 2 finalists. And they had an interim, and he understandably and wonderfully got the job. He'd come up through the system, Dr. Jackson. And I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason, and it's totally fine to put yourself out there. In fact, I actually think it's, getting back to that ego piece, I think it's pretty healthy to put yourself out there and not get it sometimes. And there's no shame in that, right? I mean, there's no like, oh my gosh, I didn't get it. It wasn't the right fit. It wasn't the right time. I wasn't the right person. And that's okay. But when Washoe came open, I thought, this really could be a place that I could make my professional home for a lot of reasons. So first of all, on the personal front, I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. And so it's a 3-hour drive to see my dad versus getting on a plane. So that was I'm at a stage in life where that's very important to me, to have that proximity to family. So that was huge. My husband's a huge mountain biker, so we're near Tahoe. So I knew he'd be happy there. So on it sort of checked the personal boxes. And then on the professional front, they have a number of relatively new board members who are incredibly committed to, creating a system that serves children and adults equally well. And they seem to be in their roles for all the right reasons. There's a staff there that is equally committed and has actually a reputation both in the state and across parts of the nation for the extraordinary work that they've done around teaching and learning, around family engagement, around social emotional learning. So the conditions are in place to soar. And as I've, come to get to know the staff, the board, the trustees, and the community, each interaction I have reinforces what I saw from the outset. And also their tagline, their promise, their motto, their mission, vision, if you will, is every student by name and face to graduation. A nice twist on what we have here in Highline. And so the fit just felt really, really right. And I thought, I could see myself here, working alongside these people for these kids. And I am very excited, and I feel incredibly honored that the trustees have trusted me to be the next leader of their system. It's going to be a lot of work. I joke with people to check back with me in 6 months and see how I feel, because, this is hard. It's hard, even when you choose wisely. And even when you're working with great people, this is hard work. And these are hard times to do the work for lots of different reasons. But I'm ready for a fresh adventure. And I believe that I've found a place in a community that I can make both my professional and personal home. And for that, I'm grateful and excited.
Well, I have a question for you, Susan, because you have so much rich experience. I was just at our local service center, and they had on this chalkboard this list. It just went on forever of all of the new superintendents in Kansas this year. And he said, take a look at that list, Jerri. Only 4 of them have experience. And he said, but they're all excited about taking on the job.
Yeah,
and I said,
excitement's good.
Excitement's good. But what advice do you give to these people that don't have experience for this tough job that's
Well,
ahead.
in a new role, but then also, I guess, a little bit of experience for your, I mean, of advice for yourself that you're going to have to take as you move on
Yeah.
with your experience, but to a new role.
Yeah, I think here in the state of Washington, Jerry, to your point about turnover and newness, I believe this year our state association said there were 60 out of 295 superintendents who were in the first year in their role. Now, some of them may have had some superintendent experience, but they were new in their role, and they're expecting that number to be similar next year. So we are seeing a lot of people who, even if they have some superintendent experience, are new to their community. And
Yes,
so and that's just
it's tough.
that's just the reality. So the first thing is, I think those of us who have been at this work for a little bit more than a minute, that we have a responsibility to reach out and to mentor. So I do that formally. I teach in AASA's West Coast certification program. So I have a group of superintendents in their first 5 years, and they go through a 2-year sort of model. We meet twice a year. We'll be meeting again in July. I mentor a couple of female superintendents in the Aspiring Female Superintendents Academy, also affiliated with AASA. So I think that stepping up into some of those formal roles to help mentor and guide other superintendents is critically important. And then I also think it's about just ongoing outreach and connecting with one another. One of the things that I'll say, and this isn't going to be something specifically to new superintendents, but one of the things I tell the superintendents in the program where I teach is, when you see a colleague somewhere in the country going through something, whatever that something is, reach out, send a handwritten note. An email is okay. Handwritten note is better. Now, you may have never met them. You may never meet them, but I want us to all think about the Uvalde superintendent right now and what he's going through.
Yes.
And I think about Bob Runcie in Broward County and what he went through a few years ago. I think about the superintendents in California during the wildfires a couple of years ago in Paradise, California, and what they went through. And I'm actually getting ready to send the Uvalde superintendent a note this week. Just because when you're in the thick of it, going through that pile, when you have a minute to do something other than respond to the whatever crisis you're dealing with, and just that note from a colleague that says, I see you, I feel for you, you're not alone, your superintendent colleagues around the country are here for you. I think that matters. I know it would matter to me if God forbid I found myself in a similarly challenging situation. And so for the new superintendents, I think the lesson there is reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out for help, and don't hesitate to reach out to connect with somebody, whether they're in need or whether they're not. So I think building those superintendent connections and relationships is critically important. I also think, know that you're going to make mistakes, and own those mistakes publicly, learn from them, tell people what you learned from them, and then do better.
Right. Right.
And I think one of the most underestimated phrases in leadership is I'm sorry. I saw an incident in a district recently of a child feeling excluded, and I watched the news coverage of it, and I watched the district statements and other things. I've seen this in a number of different districts, and they say nice things, but the one phrase that that they don't lead with is we're so sorry. We're so sorry. And it doesn't matter, I didn't personally do whatever it is that happened, but as the
But
leader
you are
of the
sorry.
system, I have
Yeah.
to say to that family, I'm so sorry that this
Right.
happened to your child and that you're going through this. What do you need? What do we need to do? And so I think remembering the power of I'm sorry and the importance of owning when you don't get it right is gonna go a long way. And finally, Jerry, the biggest thing, health and family first. I talked about my decision to move on being one sort of motivated both personally and professionally, and that the personal was weighed equally with the professional. And we have to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others.
Right.
And we can't lead if we're not healthy. We can't lead if our families aren't healthy and happy and able to support us. And so I think as leaders, modeling health and family first is really important. So, little things like putting the weekend emails in the draft folder until late Sunday night or early Monday morning. When you have, if you have your meetings end at, 5 o'clock, 4:30, put on your workout gear and say, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go do that. Those things. Go on vacation and leave your work cell at home. As leaders, if we do that, that gives others the permission and hopefully motivation to do the same. Because what I say to my folks is, I'm going to ask a lot of you, because our students need us to bring our A game every day. You can't bring your A game if you're not taking care of yourself and your family. So please do that, because when you do show up at school, at work, you got to bring it, and you have to have something to bring. So you've got to keep yourself sustained in the work.
Susan, that's what I respect about you. You are such a positive role model. You just model all of these things that you've talked about. I see you reaching out to people. I see you taking care of yourself. I see your kindness when I see you. I just really appreciate the way you model all of that for all of us. So, yes.
Authentic and real, and I think that's part of your success. I mean, it all goes back to the importance of relationship building, and people feel comfortable with you because you are in connection with them. And a lot of new superintendents will go to a district and start this change and change this and change that, but I sort of sense that your main goal is to just get to know everyone, is just start
To get
building
to
those
know everyone and
relationships
to
right
get to know the work, and what do we want to build on and amplify, and what do people want to change? Where do they see room for improvement, and identify sort of what that plan looks like. The other thing that I think is important is that we make sure that in sort of building on those relationships, that we're seeing sort of the long game, right? That we're not just doing things that are going to last for now. This work takes time. Building relationships doesn't happen overnight. And so what I will also say to my colleagues is, you got to try to stick around. Now, granted, as a superintendent, sometimes that's not our choice, right? These are highly politicized positions in a very polarized era that we are living in, right? I mean, that's just the reality. And so sometimes it's not our choice, but to the degree that it is your choice and you have the ability, you need to stay, because relationships don't happen overnight and the work doesn't happen without the relationships. So you have to invest in the time to build the relationships to get the work done. And that there's just no substitute for time. And I will also say to especially newer superintendents, you are going to have critics. People will be exceedingly unkind and unapologetically vocal in their criticism of the decisions that you make and the work that you do. And we are all human. People say, well, you must have developed a pretty thick skin. And I think in some ways I have, but I got an extraordinarily unkind email from a member of my community the other day. And, I hit delete, because I think the other thing, it's okay to not respond to every single. I mean, when I was young, I felt like I had to respond to everyone, even the really, really nasty, angry, et cetera, et cetera. It's okay to hit delete if it's not someone to engage. Now, I still played that email over in my head about 25 times in the subsequent week, right? Because that's human nature. But I think being able to say it's okay for me not to engage. Now, I want to be clear. That doesn't mean when an angry, frustrated parent, family member, community member comes to you with something that they need you to know about and act upon. That's different. But someone who just wants to share their views on who you are and what you do, you have to compartmentalize a little bit. And I think we need to give our leaders the permission and the support to compartmentalize. And I also think, quite frankly, all of us have a responsibility to elevate the level of discourse in our communities right now. I had somebody, I believe it was during the interview process for San Diego, where someone said, what will you do, to address the lack of civility that we're seeing in some board meeting? And so I said, It's not about what I will do. It's about what we will do. That's on all of us. And I would love for people to just sort of start saying, not okay, not okay to talk like that. Totally okay to express your opinion. Totally okay. And frankly, healthy and necessary to disagree. But we have to disagree in a way that doesn't lead to disrespect and dislike. We've got to get past that point, because we need to remember that our children are watching, and we are, whether we like it or not, or intend to or not, we're modeling for them.
That's right.
How they're going to engage. And don't we want our children to be able to disagree agreeably and to have hard conversations in honest but productive, respectful ways? Well, we have to show them the way to do that. And we have the power to do that. It takes some courage.
It does.
But it can be done. And I would argue we need to do it.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. We can't go on with the way things are, and the way that, if I don't believe what you believe, then we can't speak, or when we do, I'm attacking. It has to stop. And it's gonna also has to be part of the process, has to be in the classroom in order for us to get to that place, because we need to have our students knowing the right way to communicate and collaborate.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, this is not going to end, and yet we need it to.
Yeah.
And I think your recipe for success is just your strength in building relationships. So I think that your district has been lucky to have you, and your new home is going to be lucky to have you as well.
Well, I feel like the lucky one. I feel so lucky that I landed in Highline, and that the board here took a chance on me 10 years ago. And I'm lucky that this community has been as welcoming and supportive as they have. And I feel equally lucky that the Washoe community is embracing me in the way that they have. It's, this is wonderful work, and I'll sort of close with this. And Jerri, I think, may have heard me say this along the way before, but people often ask me if I love my job. And what I have come to say, and I've shared this with others, is most days, but not every day, because the job is the politics and the toxicity and the hypocrisy and the personal and professional attacks, and frankly, the mundane of signing away all the stuff you need to do. But the work of serving children is a gift, even on the hard days.
Yes.
And so I make a bright line distinction between the job and the work, and I endure the job for the sake of the work, because the serving children and families really is a gift. And I think that keeping that perspective keeps me in the work, because, I didn't have to go do another superintendency next. And like I said, check back with me in 6 months to see if I still feel like I made the right decision. I know
And we will. Yeah.
But I really do love this work. And to Jerri's earlier point, those of us who have been in the work for a while need to stay in it for a while, because we are in the very early stages of a long recovery from what all of us, especially our children, have been through over the last couple of years.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your leadership and modeling for others, and also the way you reach out to people. We really appreciate it. And it's been lovely having you on the podcast today. And best of luck to you. We're going to be watching.
Thank you, Jerri. Thank you, Jamie, for the opportunity. Great speaking with you.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.